Good morning, this is Nicole Ringgold. In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to make these hydrangea blossoms. You will need gauge 22 sterling silver sheet, as well as gauge 20 and 16 round wire. I like to use my sterling silver scrap, and then on that you can either use, this is the paper that silver comes wrapped in, and you can draw on that and paste it onto your sheet. Or you can actually take the hydrangea and take some of the petals and glue them using rubber cement onto your sheet, or just draw them. So here I'm just going to draw. And then once I draw out the outline of the blossoms, I'll saw them out. You can do as many blossoms as you want. I'm just going to do 5 for the purpose of this demonstration. I'm using my Green Lion saw frame. Wax the blade. I'm using a 3/0 blade to saw out the 22 gauge sheet. For those of you who are new to sawing, treat the saw frame like you're holding a bird and you don't want to choke the bird. So you're holding the saw frame very lightly, and then as you're sawing and you reach a bend, you want to be sure to saw through the bend. Don't just turn your blade, because then the blade will snap. Another tip is to place your fingers as close to what you're sawing as possible. That anchors the silver down, and so it doesn't flop around as you're sawing. And you may want to re-wax your blade about every inch. If you're still experiencing trouble while sawing, then you might want to check that your blade is nice and tight within the saw frame. Once you've sawed out your pieces, they'll be dirty, and I consider the color of the silver gray. So you'll want to anneal them. Annealing and pickling your pieces is a foolproof way of cleaning them. I use a little Smith torch, oxygen propane, and this is a number 6 tip. I'm going to the regular flame, and then I'm going to add more propane, which is the annealing flame. You want the flame to be soft to anneal, so you add more propane, and then you're going to heat each piece until when you pull away, the piece is kind of black. And note the soft flame tip there. If you use a normal flame that's not soft, that's just the normal combination of oxygen and propane, then you're actually work hardening your pieces. Be sure that it's soft, and that brings the fine silver to the surface. If you pickle after annealing, then your pieces will be white. So here I'm going to use, these are called cutoff wheels, and I'm going to use these to soften the edge of the sheet. If you look at the sides, it looks like sort of a boxy edge, and so I'm going to bevel the sides or taper them with the cutoff wheel to soften them so it looks more organic. You may choose to taper the upper and bottom side of your blossoms. I just did the top side, and you can see now how soft that looks in comparison. This is a Fretz number 12 raising hammer, and I'm going to use the more narrow side to texture the petals. As I'm hammering, I'm fanning outward. Here's a closer shot of how I'm doing it. And just a reminder that it's important that you anneal your pieces before hammering, because your silver could crack. Once I'm done with the texture, I'll use my Durston dapping block and the smallest dapping pin, and I will dap only the very center of each of the little blossoms. This will both cup your petals inward, and it will And it will give you the ability to drill a hole, which you're going to need to do, without your drill bit skipping around the silver. Once you're done dabbing, I like to hold my petals with pliers so that the piece doesn't get too hot in my fingers and it provides stability. And I'm using a 0.16, or I think that's a 4.1 millimeter steel twist drill bit. And I'm drilling a hole through the center of each of the grouping of petals. Then snip approximately 2 inches of 20 gauge round wire, sterling silver, and this is half hard. And then I hold them with my tweezers and ball up just one side of each of the wires. Feed the wires then through the holes in the petals. I use pretty heavy duty third hands. These are GRS, but any third hands will do. Mine are from Rio Grande. Place the wire in the third hand and be sure that the weight of the petals is on the surface, but you don't want to add more weight with the third hand. If you add more weight, then your piece will snap or collapse. Flux, I use Mighty Flux, again from Rio Grande. This is easy solder. Heating the base, turning my torch to the side and sweating the solder to the wire, and then I heat the base again to draw the solder down from the wire into the hole. That base I refer to as the mass. And you can leave it like that. You can create little stud earrings if you want to. But I'm going to fuse these 5 together to create a cluster. So I'm going to snip the wire to an appropriate length. I'm snipping them at different lengths, just slightly, and you'll see why. And then once I do that, I'm placing them into a star shape, I suppose you could call it. And they don't have to be perfectly distributed, but the center of the wires, or the tip of the wires need to connect. With the wires touching, I use my pick to make sure that in case one of the wires, as I'm heating, balls up, I can nudge it inward with my pick, the flower. And make sure your torch angle is straight down at the center of all of the wires. They need to heat up at the exact same time, and they have to be touching. So I'm going straight to the center. My pick is ready just in case I need to nudge something inward. And I'm waiting, watching until they fuse. No flux is necessary, no solder is necessary. So there they fused at the center. Now I'm going to solder a piece of 16 gauge wire. Here I'm using easy solder. I'm sweating it to the bottom of the 16 gauge wire, and I do use flux when I'm soldering. So everything is fluxed, and then I'm heating the mass down below to draw the solder from the 16 gauge wire down so that they're all then soldered together. Pickle, quench, and then you can take the flowers and fold them upward to create a little cluster. And then from here you can turn them into an earring, you can turn them into a pendant, you can turn them into a sculptural piece, put them in a vase, whatever you choose. Here I'm going to do liver of sulfur, just using an annealing flame to heat my piece so that the solder joints don't come apart. Heat it, And then I'm going to dunk it into the liver of silver so that they turn black, nice and oxidized. You can take off some of that liver of sulfur with sunburst radial discs, but here I used a fine fiber wheel. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed. Please feel free to comment or ask questions below, and I'll do my best to respond. Thank you.